Hi, everyone. I'm here with mortgage planner Cathy Sabater, and we're going to talk a little bit about the current status of mortgage, people who are late on their mortgages, and the foreclosure question.
Ricki, thank you for having me. My name is Cathy Sabater, and again, remember, these are our perspective in this uncharted real estate market, right? So we are seeing a different trend in regards to home prices increasing dramatically, right? And the difference between what's happening now and what happened in 2008 is that people now have equity in their home. And basically what's happening is because of the CARES Act, we have families, unfortunately, that are not able to make their mortgage. You do have a handful of those who can make their mortgage, and you have this forbearance. So what's the difference between forbearance and foreclosure? So many people think we're going to just have all these foreclosures coming in, and Black Knight is the source, and there's approximately 1.67 million mortgages that are 90 days late. So as far as 90 days late in real estate world, that actually starts the process before this CARES Act of what? Starting the foreclosure proceeding, right? So if you were late 3 months in a row, then the bank, the servicer, has the right to say, hey, you're delinquent. What are you going to do? Let's do something. Because we are where we're at, many people who have filed for forbearance. So what's your take on what forbearance is, Ricki?
So my understanding is because of COVID, if homeowners aren't able to make the payments, then they're able to request from their mortgage provider. I think it's for only government-backed loans, though, to delay payments and to do some kind of specific grace period.
Right. So the forbearance is allowing those families to request. When they made the CARES Act, there were no rules and regulations. If you called and you talked about forbearance, some of those services just pressed a button and you were already in forbearance. So forbearance means, hey, we know there's a situation going on and we're not going to bother you. However, you still owe me money, right? So depending on what type of agreement you signed for the forbearance, some of the services are 3 months. After 3 months, you have to renew it. Some are 6 months, some are a year. It just depends on what your scenario is and what your servicer decides to accept in regards to that. So it's almost like the student loans forbearance. We also have that. We also have the eviction moratorium. So the eviction moratorium is over. The foreclosure moratorium is over. And now it's going to be interesting because while we were going through this CARES Act, guess what was happening to people's credit scores? Their credit scores were going up. Why? Because the CARES Act said, hey, you have to show that they're making a payment even if they're not making a payment. So once this ends, I think for the student loans, I've read that it's going to be 3 to 6 months so that people can have a plan so that their credit scores don't go down, right? Now for the forbearance, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen, because if you're in forbearance, let's say a year, right? You need to be starting to talk to your servicer to say, hey, what do I need to do to keep my house, right? And then this is where you really should be contacting a person like Ricki so that she can provide you an assessment of what the value of your home is. Because let's ask the question, Ricki, if you're in a scenario, and let's say it's before the CARES Act, before COVID, and you weren't making your mortgage payment, is it not right that we should have the right to foreclose on you?
Well, that's what happened in the past.
So what's going on is you have families that were going to be foreclosed on prior to COVID that got caught in this middle of a year plus of not making mortgage payments. So when this moratorium ends, I hope they have a plan to keep their home, right? The biggest difference is hopefully they're going to have enough equity in their home so that if they did have to sell it, right, at least they have money, right? Hopefully to help them pay rent for 12, 24 months, right? And maybe pay off some bills and then get their credit up to, and then hopefully get back into the market if possible. If not, then they have to talk to their servicer and say, hey, what plans do we have in order to keep our home? Otherwise, then that's when we're going to start seeing some foreclosures, right? So let me ask you this, Ricki. We have some landlords that are not getting paid their rent, and some of these individuals, right? And this is where the seesaw comes in, right? So people say I shouldn't have to pay rent, but what about the landlords? They still have to pay their mortgage, right? So we get it, but at the end, how many of those landlords don't want to be landlords anymore? And how soon do you think that's a different world? Are they going to get foreclosed on because they haven't been paying their mortgage? Or are they going to be successful to be able to sell their property? What's your take on that?
That's a very good question. And I was just discussing this a couple of weeks ago in my real estate mastermind group. And so here's the situation. An article that I read, I don't know if it was NPR or the New York Times, because I read those often, almost every day. It talked about how there's so much federal funds for rental assistance. The issue is a lot of the tenants are not having success with getting the application signed by their landlord, because the amounts of the rent, the security deposit, and other details, how many months behind that they have to be filled out and agreed upon by the tenant and the landlord. So the issue isn't, is there help out there? The issue, from what I read in this article, was that people just aren't submitting the applications because maybe they're not talking to them. They're not on good terms anymore because it's been so long that they haven't paid the full month's rent. Or maybe they just didn't know how to fill out the forms.
Right. So in regards to the landlords that are not getting paid, right, it's going to be interesting to see what percentage are going to start selling their properties, right? Or are they going to be able to keep it and then have to some have to remodel their homes based on some of the damages that are done in the home or not, right? So there's two different ways of the inventory coming in, because the biggest thing that we have right now is demand because of because of COVID. We had all of this, and this is interesting. My perspective is we had all of this pent up demand because we had buyers on the fence going, hey, I want to wait for interest rates to go down. So interest rates went down, right? And then home prices went up, right? So then you get to this point where you get to this happy medium where interest rates are still considerably low, but still higher than they were before. However, home prices have increased dramatically because of COVID, that some people feel like they are priced out of the market. But this is where you work one or two things, right? Because the same way with you being priced out, I know some people who are renting that their rent is going up $200, $300, $400 a month just because, why? There's not enough inventory. So you still have that demand. So it's either demand for renting or demand for buying. And so we're going into this crossroads where we need more inventory. So landlords are either going to sell their home, their rental property. Hopefully they don't get to be foreclosed on, right? Because they weren't unable to do it. Hopefully they find a happy medium. And then those might be the ways that we'll get more inventory, because with more inventory, what happens, or how does that shift the market from a buyer to a seller's market when there's more inventory available?
Well, it gives buyers more choices. And it also is a big reality check for sellers. Like, okay, my house has been on the market for 60 days. And in this market, if your house is on the market for more than 30 days, you overpriced it.
Right.
As a matter of fact, just last week, there were 150 price reductions in one day in the Austin metro.
And what do you make, why do you think that is? Is it because they're overpriced and
it's just overpriced. In any market, you can overprice the house. I mean, sometimes sellers are, oh yeah, it's worth $1 million. Oh no, let's just price it kind of high and we'll see what happens. Well, then they get really angry. 90 days later, nobody's biting, not even an offer. So that's the most important thing someone can do is price it properly.
And that brings about another perspective, in that a lot of people or sellers or homeowners, most have at minimum of 10% of equity, 20, 30. So if you purchased a home 3 to 5 years ago, more than likely for the last 1.5 years, you have built more equity in the last year and a half. However, because of the way the market trends, you were building wealth anyway. right? It's just as a homeowner, you're getting to see the appreciation more. What I find, because we were in this, sellers were expecting people to pay more. So there's a difference between value and what people are willing to pay, right? So when I purchased my house last year, I paid over the purchase price because I saw value in it, right? So that was my perspective on why I purchased my home. Other people are still going through this battle of, hey, if it's that much in demand, right? There's certain areas that people are still paying over asking because they're willing to make the payment, right? And then you have the market itself, just you can't sustain, a 2% equity growth every month, right? It's not sustainable. It is still happening in certain areas, but we're finding that it's changing, right? So we'll get back into segue into foreclosures and forbearance, because how does this affect us? Well, if we've been having all this equity growth, right? We want to continue to have this equity growth, but we also understand that with forbearance, that means your house is safe from foreclosure. But come September 30th, that is supposed to end. And now those families, I'm recommending get started now on what plan you need to do so that you can be that much more prepared as what you have to do to keep your home. Because honestly, we want to take advantage of certain situations, but at the same time, we also want our family and our kids to be safe, right? So as far as foreclosures are concerned, what do you think is going to, I can't give you a number of what I think of the 1.6 million that are 90 days late. Hopefully more than half of them get to keep their home, right?
Yeah, hopefully. And if they don't, well, the good news is they've built up so much equity that they can sell and still walk away with a lot of money,
right,
in their pockets.
Right. Well, great. Well, listen, Ricki, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, my number is 360-947-8422. And what about your number, Cathy?
You can call or text me at 619-846-2675. Love having this type of conversation. Talk to you soon.